Do we have anybody here who has come to either the first or second of our panels? We have those other 2 videos ahead of time that you can watch to re-inspire, get invigorated. And I think one of the most exciting things about this series is the panel members that we've had, because Melissa has searched far and wide to find some really awesome people who've been able to give us ideas that we would not have gotten on our own, probably. And so you can almost think of this as a class where, or a panel, a seminar, where you get some really interesting top people that are able to speak the language of the actor moving forward with creating your own work. So with that, let's get started. And I would like to have you introduce yourselves, go down the line there. And if you would let us know, what story was it that you heard or experienced that made you think, wow, I want to write a story? Zach?
Hi, my name is Zack. I work at Above Average, which is like the digital wing of Lorne Michaels' production company, Broadway Video. I'm the head writer for The Kicker, which is the sports vertical. And I also am doing this fellowship through the Writers Guild called the Made in New York Writers Room Fellowship, which is more about, that's more about writing television pilots. My day job at Above Average is more about writing sketch. And before that, I did UCB stuff, which is where I met Keisha, improv and sketch writing. And before that, I was a journalist. So I wanted to be a writer because I was a shy kid, and I liked, just being able to say what I wanted, not in front of a big crowd, exactly like this, just into the page. But I think the story that made me want to be a journalist was All the President's Men. It's a very cliched answer. Every journalist loves that movie, but that was the thing that just lit a fire under me to be a writer. So.
Oh, wonderful. Timothy?
Hey, my name is Timothy Cooper. I'm a writer-director, and I actually directed, I don't know if you knew this, I directed the opening 2 readings of the Made in New York Writers Workshop.
Oh, I didn't know.
That you were probably at. Yeah. Most recently I wrote and directed a short film called Lemon, which premiered at Tribeca this year and is now. You saw it here. That's cool. I did not know that. Thank you.
Already making connections.
Cool. I like it. We'll talk later. And it's now available on United Airlines and Amazon Prime. So.
Congratulations.
It's something you can watch while other people are being dragged off the plane. It's funny. And I write other screenplays, and I am a script doctor and a script consultant as well. And I think, for me, probably Roald Dahl stories, just reading those. And I started out, I was writing short stories since I was really young. And then I thought I would be really successful at that, but I don't even know what that means, so I wasn't. And then I moved to New York thinking I would write plays, and that is also not easy. But I wrote a few, and then I transitioned to screenwriting because I wanted to tell stories to a large number of people, and that's one of the broadest ways you can do it. Yeah.
Hello. Thanks for the sound effect. My name's Keisha. I am an actor, writer, comedian. I know Zack through the Upright Citizens Brigade. And currently, I'm a staff writer on The Opposition with Jordan Klepper on Comedy Central. And so my journey to as a writer is very much an actor's journey to writing. I actually moved to New York to attend the actor's studio at the New School, get my MFA in acting. I did it, been there. And went to James Lipton's house and everything. And I did the Upright Citizens Brigade, and about 2.5, 3 years ago, it really inspired me, just being around a bunch of like different kinds of creative types beyond performing to like get to the page and show up. And so I started writing about 2.5, 3 years ago, like actually seriously, other than like angry journal posts. And it's very interesting. So the stories that like really speak to me are arranged, and they tend to be serialized. In part, that's how my brain thinks as it relates to story and character, in addition to jokes. So you have people like Lucille Ball. I rewatched everything just 2 years ago. And the other story that really speaks to me, and it speaks to the kind of person I am when I create stories for myself, like I'm currently in development with a couple of projects with a couple of production companies, but the stories that speak to me are the ones that feel familiar, but are from the voices that you don't see all the time, the marginalized. Like, I love Breaking Bad, and I saw it and I went, but where's that for a Black woman? And I love those stories. And so for me, those are all the kinds of stories that really speak to me, are things that like integrate my wildly different loves.
Wonderful. And you've all done improv. So there's that you all have in common. And so with that, telling stories on the fly, just being able to come up with something from looking in your partner's eyes that you're on stage with and create something. How is that different looking at the blank page? Because the blank page isn't looking back, there's not a human there giving you information. It's a blank page. How do you deal with that when you sit down? Because that's basically what we're talking about, moving outside of being an actor, interpreting work and creating the work that you want to interpret. Much like you were saying, Keisha, where is this for me? And when I look at that show, Breaking Bad. So do you want to talk about it? And feel free to, piggyback on the conversation as we go through it.
Sure. I mean, I think for me, for people who haven't done improv, one of the foundational principles is the idea that there's no right or wrong thing to say or do. You just need to start, and then we'll figure out what the scene is about by building on what we started with. And so I think that doing improv for a number of years sort of builds that that mental attitude in you, and so it becomes less daunting to stare at the blank page. But that said, I mean, I do everything I can to try to avoid thinking of it like that. And I think that sometimes with writing, writers especially are invested in this romantic notion of we are bravely battling against the blank page and facing the void. And I think it's easier for me to think about it as more of a not like some sort of brave venture, but rather just something you have to show up and do like an accountant would. So, I don't put pressure on myself. I do everything I can to remove pressure for the first draft or the first line or the first page to be good. I just start writing. And a lot of times I don't even like starting at the beginning of a script because that puts a lot of pressure. You put the title and the interior, exterior, and it just starts to feel like, oh boy, this better be perfect. And I would rather just start writing parts that I know, whether it's a line or a scene or a conversation. And just once you get into it, you start to feel more comfortable and you start to get some momentum. And I think that approach kind of comes from, in part from improv, just knowing that you can start anywhere and you'll find it as long as you're building on what came before.
Okay. I think one of the things too, it's like my actor brain turned on, like it's the same thing as an actor. It's like, don't be precious, right? Like you have to get over being precious, especially when you're working in professional context. You do the work, you show up, and knowing that like all you can do is bring whatever you have that day. And for me, kind of like that actor brain, the best thing to do is like when the curtain goes up, it's you. When the camera rolls and they call action, it's you. You don't get to go, no, thank you. I'm not showing up today. You show up. So it's that same muscle. So it's like whatever muscle or discipline that is for you, I like to think of it, it's the same thing, just shifting it to the page. Right. And so part of that is like for myself, I impose deadlines. I would apply to festivals. I would do things to force myself to work. And I still do that. I like set up structure because my brain is like, I would never miss a rehearsal. So why would I miss showing up to a writing date? So I use that same like math that I use in my other creative endeavors to just show up, even when I'm like, but I don't want to. Too bad. That's my experience.
I agree with everything both people have said. Yeah, I think, well, there's a saying like good is the enemy of great, but I think great, the expectation that you have to be great when you're writing is the enemy of getting anything down on the page at all. You have to be able to write garbage because then you have at least something on the page to build off of. And it's the same thing with improv. I also started at UCB and did all of that writing and directing and performing for many years. And you start with a word from the audience. And there are some teams that start with less than that. They just start with a look in their partner's eyes. And you build off of that. So once you realize that you can build from nothing, then you realize, well, then I could build off of garbage also. Like right? So you just want to get something down on the page. You want to show up and just get something down. And I would say, I don't always start at the beginning either. You might just start with the scene that excites you most, or the conflict or the dialogue exchange that excites you the most. So the heart of your film as you see it right now. Just what's the most, or just something that's really cool about it. Like if there's a fight sequence or a amazing argument or the moment where everything, all the secrets come out between the couple. Whatever it is, that's the exciting part. If that's the exciting part to you, then that's where you should start and just get something down on the page. And if I also tell all my clients, if you think that you're going to have such thing as a perfect writing day, like everything is aligned, you have time off, you have your perfect latte, it's quiet, you have the right music or whatever, that doesn't exist. And if you're waiting for that, then you'll write once every 6 months, So you have to just show up, exactly as Keisha said, like it's a job. And you're just writing wherever you can, whenever you can, and just put something on the page, and that's what you start from.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, I think it gets a lot easier the more you do it. It's like anything. It's like going to the gym. It's so hard the first day, but if you go for a week, then it is a lot easier to go that next Monday. In this scenario, this person goes Monday through Friday and does not go on the weekend.
Because they're living their life. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's fine. I think you don't have to go on the weekend if you're going during the week. Anyway, so I think it just the more you do it, the more you get used to the idea that like, okay, I have nothing right now, but I've done this enough times and it's worked out so I trust that I will have something at the end. In the same way that like an actor, like you guys, you for your first performance, you were probably very nervous, but the show went well. You did fine. You didn't die. And so the more times you go through that experience of like, gosh, I'm really nervous before the show, but it's okay. It worked out. The more you start to realize that that kind of nervousness is fine and it's just a part of the process and doesn't mean you're not meant to be doing this or something.
It reminds me of like, as an actor, it's like, it's not, I'm going back to grad school, y'all. It's not nervousness, it's energy. And it's the redirection of it. It's that same thing when you show up to the page. And I think it's like, also, don't be afraid of rituals, like in the sense that like you don't have to go over the top, that things have to be perfect, but set the kind of rituals you do. Like for me, before an audition, I would do X, Y, and Z. And it helped me create consistency in my auditioning, and it made me more bookable. Same with my writing is like you go to the gym Monday through Friday, and if you want to do weekends, you can. But one of the things that it also is, you don't have to, no pressure, live your best life. Also write down everything, because inspiration also, I feel like when you're like in the energy of writing, I'll be lying down and I'll be like, damn, that's a good joke. I got to get out of bed. And I'll write it down because I can't trust that it'll be there in the morning if I don't do that. And it's that energy of like, once the creative titles are flowing, you need to just like be like, yes, more.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, I also think I also do that. I write down everything. And I feel like that's part of my process. And I feel like all the things that are like a part of my process are just things that I discovered by doing this like a lot for many years. So you'll discover things that work for you. But yeah, I feel like one thing that I find to be very useful is I don't delete things ever. I just like if I'm writing a scene and it's not quite right, rather than, this is just something I do personally, rather than like going back in and like futzing with it and deleting it, I just copy and paste it like a new version of that scene and work on that. That way there's not the pressure of like this has to be perfect. It's just, it gives you a sense of like, okay, I'm just working out multiple versions of this and we'll see which one we like the most. Yeah.
I love that. I do the same thing because you also forget that you had a stroke of genius, that one line that you're like, now put it back in the new, better script. Because I think having multiple drafts of your script is your friend. And like saving it in a way that it's like, everything's garbage, delete it all.
Well, also, going off that, keep in mind that the scripts you read, and particularly the movies that you see, have been through so many layers, right? They are, if you consider them perfect, it's because they went through not only millions of drafts, but then they got notes from executives and collaborators, and then they got more notes from the actors, and then they went through the actual filming process, and that was different from the actual script. And then, of course, the editing process might have changed that all around. So anything that ends up perfect, if you're setting out and you're like, I have to write the next Casablanca or whatever, that's not going to happen. And that's why I say your goal is just to get, you better believe the first zillion drafts of that were like, okay. So your only goal is to, can I get some of these ideas down? And then, yes, you'll go back. Initially, your thought is probably, this is mediocre. Thank you for water. Initially you're like, why did I do all this? Isn't someone else take over for me?
Yeah, why didn't I do this? Why?
Improv.
What am I doing? What am I doing with my life? Oh no!
And then I thought to myself, subsequently I thought, then, oh wait, that line is good, and that gets across a little bit of what I wanted, and that gets across a little bit, so I can take those gems out of it and put that into the next version, and so on and so forth. So to give yourself the pressure of being like, this isn't what I wanted to put down, so I'm not going to put anything down, that's not the goal. The goal is just to put down an iteration, just try to get the general broad strokes of what you envisioned in your head. Thank you.
Always.
And that was a beautiful save, by the way. Thank you, Keisha.
Can we do that again later?
Yeah, always.
Very fun.
Someone pretend to choke.
Oh, okay.
Oh, So one of the things I think is so wonderful when you're talking about using these writing ideas, coming from the discipline of being an actor and things that have already worked, things that ways to help you get to the page, because that's what this is all about. This is about actually doing it rather than dreaming about that role that you want to write for yourself. In thinking about a medium that is so visually visual storytelling. How about getting that on the page? Because when you're writing it for yourself, just to create the character, to create the dialogue, how do you start thinking in a visual medium as opposed to something that'd be on stage? How do you start? How do you think about that? What might be a way for an actor to start being able to put in what they're seeing in their mind around the feel of the film, the types of characters, and what's happening to them?
I was lucky earlier this year. I got to be in a writer's room with a bunch of people who've worked in narratives, and like I literally sat next to somebody who like wrote movies who I'm like, that inspired my childhood. And and one of the things they said is like, what do you see? Like, watch TV, watch movie with the sound off. What is the story with the sound off? And then you can start to really tune your brain to what is the story. And obviously some of those choices are in, a lot of those choices are in the direction and art direction and the different departments, but some of those choices are directly on the page. And that's where I feel like I started doing that. And then like actually like record locations like that you're interested in, just to get a sense of like, is the location telling you anything? But like just trying to get your brain in a visual medium. I think going to art museums are great for this, and I love, like, when I started, like, really getting into writing for screen, oh, man, those Renaissance painters, they blow your mind. Just how people are, like, framed, and that, like, remembering, like, the actor part is, like, and he reached out for her, and then he withdrew. Just those kind of little things of, like, okay, that tells the story. Whether it makes it to the final draft or not, that intention can help make it to the story. That action, the visible actions also help to tell the story, even if the words aren't there. Because I feel like for me, when I first started writing, it's kind of like improv, like I feel right now. You get a lot of verbal diarrhea where you're like, words fix everything. When words, as we all know, don't tell all the story. That you can tell a story with 0 words and be incredibly impactful. So it's just like, again, I think looking how do you get visually inspired and reawaken that part of yourself.
And Keisha, just to be clear, when you were saying earlier about recording in spaces, do you mean literally like taking your phone,
Yep.
you know, I love this street, I'm going to just do this now, and then be able to use it as a feel, like a tone?
Yeah, like walking down 42nd Street on a Saturday at midnight. Woof. Has an energy, has a feeling, and if you just use that as a setting, right? If that's just your setting, you're giving an energy, right? Like you can hear the sounds just in saying that. So it's like if you want to tell a story and like some of the things I'll do, I'll go watch YouTube videos of those locations, like just to see what they have and to remind myself of like, oh, a vast field with daisies that have gone past their prime or whatever that is. So that's how I do it.
Well, that's so doable. That's doable for every one of us with our phone, with our computer, being able to look at YouTube. So, I mean, that's such a hands-on. Like, I just feel like when we're talking tonight, there's so many things that are going to be directly usable that you can use tonight, tomorrow, and as you're doing your writing journey. So, thank you. That just sounds like such a hands-on approach. Go ahead.
Yeah, I totally agree with Keisha. And I think it's also something that I feel like at UCB, people say this a lot, like, because people take improv classes, right? And people get very in their heads about, like, oh, I got to read this book and I got to take more classes, and just if I get this one thing that I'm doing wrong right, then I'll be good. And what we teachers will often remind students is you have to like go out and like live your life too. So not just like watching TV or like going to rehearsals, like going out and having experiences in the real world, going on vacation, going to different places. Those kinds of things like trigger the kind of images that Keisha was talking about. But I also think like the other thing I was going to say was for me, like thinking visually is also something that just came from practice. Like I remember when I first started writing videos at UCB, they weren't particularly written well visually, and you'd have to have conversations with directors where they'd say, I don't know what you're seeing here. And so, but by going through that process many times, then you start to like see it from the director's perspective when you're writing, and you start to write more visually. So I think that can come too just from practice.
Yeah, and there's also maybe even an interim to getting it on the screen, which is you rehearse it or just do a reading with actors. And just when you hear, or in my case, when I hear how horrendously overwritten everything is, well, then that's still really that is extremely helpful, because first of all, the actors will bring their own intentions to it and say, you know, oh, did I really need to say that? And also you'll hear in your own writing, you know, with good actors, even if you are yourself a good actor, you will hear others, you know, they're saying so much and they could have said half of that and it would have just delivered the same amount of information. So for me, just that reading process in a rehearsal room is really helpful. And I'll do that at multiple stages of the script, when it's really like pretty rough, and then when it's a little more refined, and then rehearsal when we're about to go into filming.
Yeah, I feel like getting feedback from table reads or rehearsals or writers groups is like so key. I feel like when I started writing, I had this misplaced sense that like if I was a good writer, I should be able to like sit in a den like Nabokov or something and just crank out like a classic by myself with no like help from anyone else, and that's just not the way it works. And so it's so essential that you show your work to other people, get their honest feedback, really receive it and hear it, and revise endlessly based on that.
When you're talking about a short film format, 8 to 9 minutes, maybe 10 with credits, how do you shape your story as you're putting, you know, pen to paper or sitting on our computers or however we're going to actually write it, knowing that you have a very short time to tell this story? What are some ways when you know you don't have a long time to tell it? Can you talk a little bit about writing for the short film?
Well, the first thing I would say about that is that it's not supposed to be a miniature version of a feature film. It is just supposed to be a moment or a scene or a couple scenes from a film, or not even that. It doesn't have to be from anything. It's supposed to be a moment in a person's life. And sometimes you'll see a short film that's, you know, or you'll see a draft of a film or a script that's like 20 pages, 30 pages, and that's a fine place to start. But then I would still ask, well, what is the most essential part of that? What is the part where everything comes to a head? All the conflicts come out in this moment. Well, that's the center of a short film in particular. And so when you see, you know, when people are trying to do an epic story, this is probably not the forum for that. And so that's one way that it can be, you know, that you can figure out which minutes you actually want to portray. And just one other thing I'll ask myself or others when I'm looking at their scripts is, well, why today? why does this take place on this moment of this person's day? And if it's you never see a film about the second most interesting day of someone's life. It is the most interesting, most difficult, worst, you could say, day of their life. And just to be more specific for a short film, the worst moment of the worst day of their life. And that goes for comedy, that goes for horror, that goes for action. I mean, it doesn't really matter. And so if you're not sort of centering on that moment, focusing and crystallizing that moment, then it might be too wide-ranging at the moment.
It'd be funny to have a horror film about like the second worst day in the victim's life. Like there's no Freddy Krueger. It's just like, it's still scary.
It's the day after Nightmare on Elm Street. Everybody's like, what are we going to
Still
do?
traumatized.
Yeah,
but
yeah, you're
there's
like,
no
that was
active
rough.
danger.
Should we go to therapy? I guess so.
I would watch that.
I would watch that too.
We have the rights to that, right?
Yeah.
We said it first,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
So
Great. I can't wait to come and watch that film. Maybe we'll show it here. So what about that first minute? Okay, so like say I have, 8 to 9 minutes in my short film. And so you have that first minute to really introduce the audience to the character, the world that you're creating. How important is that? Is it just like, does it double down in importance because it is a short film, because you have a short time to tell this moment in someone's life?
Well, I personally, most of what I do now is for the internet. And so I think there's definitely a premium on. See, it's like a totally different situation. Like in a theater like this, if someone's watching your short film in a festival, they're a hostage. They can't leave. They already paid their money, and so there's just like they are just resigned to the fact that they're going to watch your whole short film no matter what, unless it's very, very offensive. So like even our Day After Nightmare on Elm Street movie, they're going to watch all the way through.
Yeah.
But on the internet, there's all these things competing for your attention, obviously, and not even just other videos. So writing for the internet especially, and if you're planning to put your video up on YouTube or Facebook or something, I think it is really important to grab people's attention and those first moments just give them the reason why, like eliminate preamble and throat clearing and get immediately to the reason why this is interesting and compelling. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, and also when people are judging your film for film festivals or reading your script for a production company or a studio, they're making very similar judgments, actually. I mean, there's a little more leeway given, but at the same time, it's like for every page or just like every few seconds of a short film, if you're a judge or a feature film at a festival, you're just like, could I turn this off? Right? Is it grabbing my attention? Is it going to be different? Can I trust this person? Can I settle down? Or should I be, browsing Facebook in another window at the same time while I'm watching it? And we want to get away from that. So we always want to start with some sort of bang, and that doesn't mean like a explosion or something like that, but just a moment where we attach to a character and we see them in a moment of strife.
Yeah. I was going to say, and even building on that, just something like behavior. Like, I think seeing like a behavior that snatches you, like snatches your attention is also interesting. Like, as it relates to these moments, can just be very captivating right off the page. Especially, it's that thing too, I feel like, also when you start not being like, okay, so let me explain all the things that happened before. So it was really sunny outside, which definitely impacts it because she has a sunburn. I'll explain. And like, you're like, I don't care. And just getting to like, oh, she's got a burn across her face. I don't know why it's a burn.
A lot of burns.
It's a lot of burns. The Nightmare on Elm Street day after was really intense.
Yeah.
But speaking of Breaking Bad, that pilot, I mean, that's one of the greatest pilots of all time because it begins with, right, a dude in his underwear, and he's driving a stolen van, and there's sirens coming after him, and you're just like, I gotta know more about this dude.
Visually, you go, what? You're like, these are contexts that don't belong together. Yeah. Show me more. I demand it.
Yeah, it's kind of a really like common tactic now is to start in the middle, and then they have that. It's like in Fight Club they do this too, where it's like, why don't we start back at the beginning? But they start in the middle. But I think it's also okay, like as you're writing, like it's okay to find that part later and just start where you start, and then you just keep honing it as you're writing. Like, do I really need this part, or could we cut this scene and start like in the higher stakes scene?
Yeah, totally. And we don't, as Keisha was saying, we don't need a lot of. We don't, in a short film, we probably have basically zero room for backstory. It doesn't really matter what happened before this moment. Again, we're asking why this moment. And everything that happened in this character, whatever character we start with, everything that happened in their backstory will be borne out by their behavior in this moment. So that's why all we need to see is this moment. We don't need to see what their life was like before, or what they ate for breakfast or whatever. That it really doesn't matter. It's how did everything come to bear on this moment right now.
Yeah, that sounds like a great way to just like get to it, because I like what you were saying, Keisha, about how we tell stories. Like, I need to tell you all this ahead of time, instead it's just go to it. And so if you're thinking about creating a character that you want on film, and so you're writing it for yourself, this is something that you feel like, I really want to do this character. This is very different from me, or this is something that is so me, but maybe heightened. So I guess you would just like take all of that and trust that the visual medium that you're creating and the story that you're in, the situation that you're in, will bear out what the backstory was, that we will come to know this character. It just seems like, with a longer format, you have so much more time to understand, to get used to. And this is just get into it. So I like what you were talking about earlier about being able to start anywhere you want in the story when you're writing, just follow that inspiration. And then it sounds like maybe when you're going back in and restructuring, that's when you decide where you want to start the story. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, totally. I mean, this is just me, but I revise endlessly over and over again. It was impressed upon me by, I was just always shocked coming up at how people I thought were just such awesome, amazing writers. I was shocked when I saw how much they revised, because I'd see their first draft and think or it wasn't their first draft, but I'd see an early draft and I'd think that's amazing. And they'd revise so much after that. So yeah, I'm a big fan of just revising aggressively as possible, and also cutting as much as possible. And so a lot of that is just like shaving off preamble and throat clearing that on the first few passes you think you need, but then you realize, like, actually we can just start in the cafe with the cell phone placed in front of the woman.
Freddie.
Yeah.
So many burns, too.
Can I just ask you something? When you talk about revising, are you revising while you're writing, or do you actually let yourself go ahead and write what's there and then come back to it? Because it's so easy to get so self-critical, that everything, it needs to be just thrown out all the time. I know you talked about not deleting, and you both had talked about that, you too, Keisha, and I think that's so great to keep those ideas. But so how do you keep yourself rolling and not get into the inner critic that's telling you, this all needs to go?
Yeah, I think, and I'd be interested in what you guys think. Again, it comes with practice. One tactic that I do is sometimes I'll put in, like, rather than putting in dialogue, I'll put in like bracket he says something about how she has burns from Freddy Krueger on her face or whatever. I just say like what the dialogue is supposed to communicate, because you can get lost in like wordsmithing, and you start to think, anytime you're over at thesaurus.com, you have gone astray. You know, like you can do that, which happens to me all the time. I get obsessed with like, that's not quite the right word. That's not what I mean. But yeah, so I'll put in like brackets saying like, this is what she's supposed to be saying, just so that you can like move forward with the scene.
I also, for me in my process, and it definitely has come from like mainly working on pilots and then working on narrative stuff, is like the outline of the action comes way before the dialogue for me. That the movement of the piece for me is something I need to have before, because in a way, this is me. I feel like dialogue is way easier than understanding the movement of a piece. So it's like, I know I can figure out the dialogue, but what is the movement? And sometimes the movement doesn't quite work. And like, for me, those are the moments when I try to talk it out to someone who knows nothing about the story I'm about to tell, so they can go, that doesn't make sense, right? Doesn't make sense without dialogue. If I give you an overview of what should happen in the scene, does it make sense? And if it doesn't make sense, then I go back. That's like one of the things I do, because I feel like if I start with dialogue first, I'll write into a void, I'll get into pretty colors, and I'll go all sorts of places. But if I write like, I am writing this scene from the outline that's supposed to accomplish these three things, I'm much more judicious with how I write my dialogue, because I'm looking to accomplish the goal, not just to be like doing my 13-year-old bad poetry kind of on the page.
And I will sometimes write if I don't know what to say, then I will write the most cliched bad version of the dialogue. I call it bad dialogue. And someone will say, right, or they'll say the subtext, right? So someone's like, I love you, but you never say you love me. And then, well, this is all from our script, of course.
Yeah. It's in a first draft.
And then someone was like, well, you've never given me the opportunity. Right? So they just say exactly, and so that gets a lot of pressure off of you, because you know that that's not going to be the final version, but it doesn't matter. You just got it down on the page. And for example, if you look at an early draft of Bridesmaids by Annie Mumolo, that has entire sections, just like you're saying, where it will just say, there's a really cool action sequence here that we haven't figured out. Or like, this is the climax where they fight. And that's totally fine. That they just put that in there because we just want to, if you just want to keep writing, is the point. Just get it on the page.
Totally. There's an abbreviation from journalism called TK. Exactly. TK means like to come. So a journalist would write that, meaning like, kicker to come or whatever. Like this part is not in there yet. And I write that all over my scripts. It just gives you license to move on to the next thing. Like reason she leaves the scene, TK.
And it sounds like it's a placeholder and it's a way to keep moving forward. What if you're thinking about, I can't do my film unless I have CGI, or unless I'm able to, film in Lincoln Center at a performance of the Met or something like that. What do you do when you kind of got these perfect scenarios? Like in the same way, getting into the perfect dialogue. What can you do so you can keep moving forward?
You mean turn off your producer brain? Because those are producer problems. But like if you are self-producing, I think it's very different than if you are doing that. So it's that hard part of like, I'm judging my story versus trusting if you're around other creatives who can like like I have friends who have like very strong producer brains and be like, you know what, you could accomplish that same goal if you said it instead of a hospital, you said it at a hospice that looks like someone's home. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, I guess that could work too. So I try not to write that way at first because that's like my producer brain going, limit, no, money, deadlines, gotta do this. Which is important, but I don't know if it's important that early.
Yeah, I totally agree. The first drafts, maybe don't worry about that. But then be open to what you can accomplish with the resources that you actually have. Because whatever budget you're working for a short film won't equal the budget of a single set on a commercial, on a 30-second commercial. You know what I mean? So we're not, your goal is not to push a minimal budget to try to look like a major TV show or film, because it just won't. But if you are working within the confines that you have in later drafts, then you'll be much more successful if you're pushing what you have within. And it can really help to have some spaces in mind that are a little more gettable, right? Like, and we can often set those same conflicts there, right? If it's like someone dying in a hospital, then could they be dying at home? A lot of these end up in just someone's apartment, as you might imagine. Yeah.
Outside, in the apartment, free places.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I feel like, and maybe this puts me a little bit at odds with Keisha.
No.
Disagreement, but
We'll see how this resolves.
This doesn't bode well for our collaboration.
It's falling apart already. I think I think you're right. I mean, maybe I mean, the examples you gave were CGI and Lincoln Center, which are totally not gettable. I feel like, and maybe years of doing sketch comedy with no budget have kind of nailed this into my brain. But I try to just avoid, it's okay to think a little bit, but I try to avoid anything on that level. Because the thing is, like, ultimately you want to be able to produce and make your scripts. The worst thing is, like, you have this great script, of which I have many. Wow, that sounds so self-aggrandizing. I meant that.
How many?
We're
sounds
talking
like a lot.
rooms full, okay? What I meant was I have a lot of scripts that I like personally, and I never was able to make them because they just weren't producible without a huge budget. And it's frustrating, you know? And so and you learn a lot from putting your script up or producing it. And so I think especially when you're starting out, it's good to aim for those like cafe, living room type things, just because you'll get to make it that way. And so I mean, Keisha, you're right. Like, you don't want to like be a producer before you've even like written a word, but I think it's also good to aim.
Yeah, I also think don't it's start there, but at some point you have to turn on the producer brain, especially if you're self-producing, and also in that way it depends on like how important is the story to you to also, when you get to the point where you're like calling in favors, because you might not get CGI, but you also might decide to work with someone who like does really cool animation and it fits the tone and style, and you're able to like anything else. If you've ever like produced like theater sketch, you're like, I've turned this milk carton into a crown. Ta-da! And we bought it. Like, there's ways to do it. I think it's just important to like remind yourself, you're like, where's my, like, because it's that hard thing of like, I try not to go too hard with my professional desires into my creative endeavors when I'm first starting out. Otherwise, I'll murder all the joy.
Yeah, and I would say I've seen, we've all probably seen short films that I was on the set of some short films that ballooned out of control, where they were in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I also remember one of my favorite short films I ever saw at Sundance, and it was filmed in someone's apartment with 2 people and a cat. And that teaches you that what people are buying into when they're watching your film or reading your script or checking out your pilot is characters. They want to see characters they connect with in deep conflict. And if you absolutely need to do it at Lincoln Center, then you have to figure out a way to make that work. But is that where we really need to see those characters, or can they be in our cafe? Right? So it's all about the characters, and the budget is almost, that has no influence, almost no influence on actually how invested we are in your film.
Oh, thank you. There's so many good viewpoints about giving yourself permission to get started, because it sounds like in so many ways there's no wrong answers. You just have to start, and once you get moving forward with it, of course there are other aspects of it. I was wondering, for you, Keisha, you touched on outlines. Can you talk about how important that is for you, or how you work with them?
Oh, so if I have a story in my mind, I want to think scene by scene. Like, how am I moving scene by scene? If it's a short, obviously it might be one scene. It just, if that's the case, then it's knowing the beats of the story I'm trying to hit. And so if it's multiple scenes, I literally write out what happens, the location, and what happens in the scene, what characters, and like what it's supposed to accomplish. And then I move on to the next scene, and the next scene, and the next scene, until I have the end. And for me, sometimes that process is really helpful to do it on postcards, because you can realize that you're like, that can go. That's just me goofing around. And or you can just do it linearly. It doesn't really matter how you do it. But for me, outlining just helps get organized the story. And for me, I need organization in my life to be able to feel like I can understand what's happening. And when there's pieces missing, I get stuck. But if I can visually see this and this, and because of those smashing of events, the end, I go, okay, I'm satisfied. But if I look and it's like this, and maybe this, and this, if I'm confused looking at it, I know that I can remove things, add things. And I haven't invested as much time as like sitting down and writing the whole scene. So for me, it's like knowing the flow of the piece versus like just flowing out the piece and hoping it's good.
Yeah, I'm the same. I need to know what I'm aiming for, right? Where it's going to end, or at least some semblance of where it might end. Because otherwise, then I can just sit down and write dozens or hundreds of pages where it just is wandering about, and that's an okay way to explore. But I would rather actually be headed toward some sort of destination. And there's even a phase between outlining and writing the scenes, and that's writing a synopsis or treatment. And that's just where you're writing it out as essentially a short story in happening in real time, right? In present tense. And you're just writing it out paragraph by paragraph. And it can be in any level of detail you want. But I usually find that if I can't write out a synopsis, it just means that the events are just bouncing around, as you're saying, and they're not. They have to be causal, right? Each event has to cause the next one. And it's going to be very hard to write it in a paragraph form, in a short story form, if the events are just, this happened to her and this happened to him. And you're like, well, how are these connected? And so when you write it out in that short story format, for me, that helps me know, okay, I actually have a story where each event piggybacks on the next one.
Yeah, and I also use outlines, so we're back in agreement.
Oh, I missed you, so thank you.
But I was just going to say, the one thing I would counsel people on is I think outlining is so important, and it's the thing is, it's not fun. It can be quite a slog, and it doesn't. The thing that's tricky is it doesn't feel like writing because you're just kind of sitting there thinking about stuff, and like I try to write as much of it down as possible, even when I'm just thinking like, oh, maybe she goes here, maybe she goes there, but it just doesn't feel as much like writing as when you're writing a script and you're getting pages. So it can be frustrating to be at the end of a few-hour writing session or the end of a day. You feel like you haven't done anything today because you've just been working on this outline that's not done yet. But that's part of the process too.
What about log lines? Do you feel like that is an important part of it? I happened to find one for Casablanca. It's funny that you'd mentioned that earlier, but
It's like he knew.
Yes, exactly. He was reading my mind. But the log line is just usually one sentence that tells you what's going to be. I thought this. I looked this up. And it said that states the central conflict of the story, often providing both a synopsis of the story's plot and an emotional hook to stimulate interest. And an example was Casablanca, set in unoccupied Africa during the early days of World War II. An American expatriate meets a former lover with unforeseen complications. And the reason why I chose that is because we know that movie, so what happens. But this idea of doing the log line, which is just taking everything and just making it very, very clear and very, very short. Do you ever work with that? Is that a way? Because then, to be able to get across what you're going to be writing before you get started.
Yeah, I always write a log line, or more realistically, dozens of versions of a log line. And I force all my clients to, and they hate that. They hate me for it. Because you're like, oh, this story is too complex. It can't be condensed down to a sentence.
Boo, that's a lie.
That's wrong. That's wrong.
You're
because
right.
we agree more than you two agree.
Well, no, I agree with that too. I just didn't verbally boo.
Forget about it.
We get it.
But so, and it should have, because that way you need to distill your protagonist, your antagonist, and what they're going for, and what the consequences will be if they don't achieve it. And it's really hard to distill, thousands of words, or a whole outline if you have that, or a whole script if you have a rough draft of that, into a logline. But honestly, if you can't figure out what that distillation is, what the real conflict at the heart of your script is, it's going to be really hard to pitch it to anyone, or for others to understand it. And that lack of clarity is probably reflected in the script itself, I've found.
Yeah, and I think, and when you're writing sketch comedy, for example, we would, at UCB, people in classes, will read someone's sketch, and the first question we always ask someone is like, okay, what's the game
of the sketch?
Of the scene? Yeah, and the game is an improv and sketch term, meaning like what's the one unusual behavior or point of view that we're exploring in this scene. But the point is, we always ask students that, because if you can't state the game of the scene in one sentence, it means it's too complicated or you don't have a game. It should be something as simple as, I'm trying to think of a sketch everyone's seen, like the cheerleaders sketch on SNL. The game is they're cheerleaders, but they're at sports that you would not normally have cheerleaders in. So it should be that simple. And I think it's the same thing for narrative, short film, and pilots. If you can't state what the show or movie or short is about in a sentence, it means it's too complicated or there's too much going on, and you need that clarity of a single sentence to know what you're ultimately focusing on.
I also think treatment, I write a one sheet typically for everything I do, and a one sheet is just like the take, and it'll have a summary. It's not as in depth necessarily as a treatment, depending on the length of your project. I think the organization of your ideas before you get to the page is very helpful. I think that's a lot of what we're actually talking about, is organizing before you get to the fun story part where you see pages and dialogue and things, really helps the quality in the back end for me, I've found, versus just going with the wind. it's a disaster. Like maybe you'll have like one thing that feels great, but overall you'll get a lot of structure notes, character notes, versus if you do the other stuff, you actually can get rid of, like take care of a lot of that business before you ever show up to the page to write the script itself.
I have a question for these
Please.
guys. Because I wonder if you agree with this. I feel like it's okay sometimes to start without the super clear log line and just kind of, okay. All right.
Yeah, I start with bad log lines too. Not like it's not a log line. I'd be like, and I'm gonna pitch it. It's usually just like, this is the story. It's about these group of people who are doing this thing. Okay.
Yeah, and of course sometimes it takes you tried for a log line and then you write a bunch of drafts and you realize it's about something entirely different from what you realized, and that's totally okay to change the focus in that sense. But ultimately, yeah, a log line helps me, and I think a short film is very similar to a sketch or an improv scene in many ways, because something else you find is in a sort of not as great short film or sketch is that there are two weird things, and you don't really need two weird things. A short film doesn't need to be about two people's equal, weird thing that happened to them that day. It's about we're just exploring one event in depth, and it's the same with the game of a scene, and it's the same with a short film, and ultimately it's actually kind of the same with a feature film.
Yeah, and I think allowing it to change, I think that's why I like it, like just having an idea so you can also know whether to scrap it or you're totally off base. You're just like, uh-oh, I did not write that, so I should really rethink what I am writing a little bit just so I have some direction, or I should steer the ship back to where I was intending.
Oh, I was just quickly. I was going to say that another thing you can do with log lines is explore an idea without having to write the whole thing. So,
Yes.
For my managers will demand when we're embarking on a new idea, they will go through 10, 20, 30, 50 log lines of just different projects or different iterations of different projects, and then you can start to ask questions about it. So it's a good way to start exploring. And if you're not precious about it, it's a good way to just, you wrote a whole script in a sentence, and then we can start exploring it. And you realize how many ideas you can have, and that you can just, you end up, the more you have, the more you can throw out to pick the best of the best.
Yeah, and I just piggybacking on that, I think it's really useful to like share your log lines with other people. Because usually, maybe not 100% of the time, usually you can tell based on the reaction, like if people like laugh or seem really interested or excited by the log line, it's like a really compelling idea. And if you can feel the sort of lukewarm energy, then maybe it's not so worth doing. Although occasionally, sometimes something what's interesting about it doesn't come across 100% in a log line. But.
And sometimes maybe you realize that it's your word choice in the log line, because that matters too, like crafting, like you're like, oh, I said this means this, but I gave no indication of tone or character. So I really have to add that back in. But I think reading, I was lucky. I was earlier this year, I was a part of an incubator program that took a bunch of creators, and we actually had a day where for 6 hours we just went around sharing our log lines, right? And getting the reaction of a bunch of people who are also in a creative space, and you're all just sharing your log line. You go, wow, that needs work. Or I didn't like, you're right, I didn't like that story that much. Or I can tweak it like that, and they'll give you the energy. But feedback is helpful.
Yeah, and you can actually find, there are many places where you can find some examples of log lines, but one that just pops to mind is if you're familiar with the Blacklist, which is a list of scripts that agents and assistants have enjoyed throughout the year, but that haven't been made. And that comes out the end of each year, and you can Google this list, and they will list maybe 100 scripts that haven't been made yet, that producers liked and so on. And they write all the log lines that someone has written them, probably not the actual screenwriter, but someone has written them for each of those 100 or so unproduced screenplays. And you can just start to see the variety and how much you're excited by some and bored by others. And some, a cool thing is that the ones that are often, or hopefully, that are supposed to be horror films, you'll be like, I see why that's scary. And the ones that are supposed to be comedies, you're like, that I chuckled at that, or like I smirked at that, whatever. So you can start to see how you can fit the tone and a huge amount of variety within just the more log lines you read, the more you can learn from them.
Yeah, and I think it's just really helpful to read all those log lines, because obviously any kind of writing, if you want to be a novelist, you need to read a lot of novels. If you want to be a filmmaker or screenwriter, you need to watch a lot of features or shorts. But like, who has the time to read like 50 pilot scripts that are 30 pages long, right? But if you can go through 100 log lines and really get a sense of like, okay, it just gives you a better awareness of like, this idea feels pretty done versus like, this feels like a genuinely interesting thing that I haven't seen before.
Well, we're getting ready to wrap up now, and I want to thank you so much, because I feel like what you gave us as actors is a hands-on approach, that it doesn't have to be perfect. There were so many great tips I heard tonight about turning that perfectionist part of yourself off so that you can give your artist. I loved, Keisha, how you talked about your artistic life and the other aspect of the working person, and giving yourself a balance. I'm not saying it exactly how you said it, but just giving yourself the opportunity to do this. And that's what this series is all about, is really empowering you to use these tips and tools so that you can create something right now. And so I would like, please, if you would just let us know where we can find you, if there's something that you'd like us to watch that you've done, and that would be great.
Uh-oh, I didn't prepare a plug.
All right. Yeah.
I write for thekicker.com. I am on Twitter. I'm a terrible tweeter, though, so actually I take that back. Don't.
Okay.
I'm going to follow you right now.
Yeah, you did not.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Zack Phillips.
Okay.
So I do stuff at UCB and above average in the Kicker. Thank you for the opportunity that I failed to take advantage of to plug myself.
Timothy?
Well, I might have mentioned that you can watch Lemon on all United flights, and Amazon Prime. And Amazon is actually a really good place to see. Also YouTube and Vimeo. You could see so many short films and just start to get a sense of what is actually engaging you or not. Anyway, so watch Lemon. I actually, this is funny, I haven't thought about it in a long time, but I did spend a year where every single day I posted a log line online. And just gave it away. And it was more an exercise for myself, but it was fun. And you can still find that, I think, at 365loglines.com, 365loglines.com. If you want some examples of log lines of stuff I never followed up on.
Did you follow up on any of them?
I think no, but I thought about it. I really thought about it.
Okay, keep thinking.
And got some attention. And you can see more about me on blueprintscreenwritinggroup.com, blueprintscreenwritinggroup.com. And don't follow me on Twitter, probably, either.
Okay. Keisha?
Oh, follow me on Twitter. I'll take all their love. You can, on Twitter, I'm KEISHAZ. That's it. That's short.
I already followed you.
Oh, I know.
Before the panel.
I saw. And so you can watch The Opposition Also, you can come to the show and like see a taping live, doing a live nightly show in New York. It's nice to get audience and New Yorkers in town, not just people who are trying to do some fun thing from out of town. So the opposition with Jordan Klepper. I'm also in a short film that I'm very passionate about, and I signed up for before it was on theme with the universe. It's called Believe Her. It's a short. Aaron Doyle Cooper is the director, and I believe, and she wrote it, and it's about a woman's experience after sexual assault, and it's I'm very excited. We just wrapped on it. Oh, I guess early October. Yeah, early October. It's called Believe Her. So look for the Believe Her. Believe Her. So why? The world is hard. So, and you can, and my website's KeishaZollar.com.
Thank you. Please, let's thank our panelists for being here. We so appreciate you. Thanks, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.